Hello YouTube and welcome back to another book review from me, your host, Logan Albright. Today I'm talking about another novel from one of my favorite science fiction writers. I've done a few of these on the channel, and this is Philip K. Dick. Now, Philip K. Dick is a great science fiction writer, and I love a lot of his stuff, and I first became enamored with him because of his short stories. I love his short stories. They've been the basis of many great films, and he's got a lot of short stories that have been published, but I think they're the most clever and creative and well-written short stories ever. He's probably my favorite short story writer. So I really got into him maybe when I was a teenager and read all these short stories. And I thought, okay, I've read all the short stories of Philip K. Dick. What do I do now? I want to read some of the novels. And the first novel I decided to read by him was actually this one. It's not the first time I've read it. I read it maybe 20 years ago. And it was called Martian Time-Slip, and it's the first entry in this second volume of the Library of America edition of Philip K. Dick's works. I've reviewed all the novels in the third volume previously on my channel. You can check those out. This is the second volume, 5 novels of the 1960s and 1970s. And I love the Library of America, so I recommend them. They're really nice hardcover editions with lots of explanatory notes and stuff in the back. Lots of good supplemental materials, timelines of the author's life, things like that. They're always great quality. Recommend. So I got this one, and it's got 5 novels in it, and the first one is Martian Time-Slip. Now, when I read this about 20 years ago as the first novel I had read by Philip K. Dick, after reading all of his short stories, I really didn't like it. And I thought, he doesn't know how to write novels. He's only good at short stories. And I abandoned them for many years and only came back to his novels much later. I don't know why I didn't like it. I can't really remember anything about it from that first reading, except for this, it just didn't grab me. It didn't hold my attention. But I reread it just now because I wanted to do a thorough job of reading this volume from the Library of America, and I really did like it this time. I thought it was very good. So I'm not sure what I was thinking. I guess I just wasn't in the mood or in the mental state at that time in my life to appreciate the book, but I really appreciate it now. And it's got a lot of really interesting themes in it, and it's also an extremely dark novel. It's really kind of depressing and bleak in a lot of ways, which is interesting. So brief plot overview. This is written in 1962, sort of in the middle period of Philip K. Dick's career. Not his late stuff, but not his early stuff. His late stuff tends to be a little bit more spiritual. This is a little bit less so, a little bit more material, I guess, but he's still preoccupied with a lot of the same themes that he talked about throughout his life. And it takes place on Mars, as you might imagine, and it's been colonized, but it's still kind of a frontier wilderness, and it's not really doing that well. People are trying to get there, and space travel is causing all kinds of developmental problems. Children born after people who have traveled in space have mental problems, and they are kept in this kind of asylum for special children that they have there. And one of these children is named Manny, and he's autistic, doesn't really communicate with others. And his father ends up killing himself because he can't deal with the problem of having an autistic kid, which is really dark. And I found this interesting because 1962 is early to be talking about this kind of stuff. I always have heard that the movie Rain Man is really what introduced a lot of Americans to the idea of autism, and that it really kind of popularized this very poorly understood and poorly known thing. But this is, 16 years before Rain Man, and he's talking about autism quite extensively, and I find that really interesting. And I can imagine that some people reading this in 2023 may get upset about the way that autism is depicted, because it's interesting. I just watched a video about autism recently, and they mentioned that in the past, people thought that autism was caused by poor parenting. Like the mother and father didn't show their child enough attention or enough love, and they would cause them to withdraw. And that's not thought today, obviously, but that theory is kind of brought up and referenced in this book. So I can imagine people kind of getting upset at the depiction of autism in this book not being accurate to 2023 standards of understanding it. But I think that's silly, because you can't expect people writing in 1962 to have a 2023 medical understanding of things. And you have to appreciate kind of getting their point of view, their perspective on the world that they were experiencing at the time and the limits of human knowledge. And that's kind of what sci-fi is all about. It's about exploring ideas and exploring things that have not been fully understood yet. And I'd say, we still don't fully understand autism even close. So it's interesting to see this kind of early take on it. And so anyway, there's this kid, Manny, and basically this rich land developer guy, Arnie Cott, is trying to use him in order to he's trying to access the special powers that he believes these children have in order to get some real estate on this mountain range in Mars that they're trying to develop and build into this big housing complex. And he basically, the central idea of the novel is that people with these mental disabilities, whether it's schizophrenia or autism or various other things that are caused by space travel, are living a life disconnected with the timeline that we all live in. They're experiencing time differently than the rest of us. They're seeing into the future, or they're seeing different versions of the future, or they're seeing into the past, or various things like that. They're out of sync. They're out of sync with the rest of the world. And that's sort of the idea of what this kind of mental illness could mean in this book. And I found that kind of interesting. And I know that Philip K. Dick, the author, kind of struggled with this. He's been called schizophrenic himself. I don't know if that's actually true or if that was a real diagnosis he got, but I know that he's been described as someone who struggled with mental illness. And so it's a theme that shows up in a lot of his works. And it definitely is a central theme here. It's trying to understand why certain people are disconnected from the reality of everyone else and why they have trouble relating or communicating. And this idea that has to do with time is really interesting. There's a lot of other themes in the book that are treated in various ways, some kind of cursory, some kind of more drawn out. But they're all pretty dark themes. There's themes about colonialism and racism, and there's themes about suicide, and there's themes about land development and capitalism and all these other things that are kind of wrapped into this. But mainly the mental illness is the main part of it. And I think the complexity that is presented in the father of the child with autism is really interesting, because he loves his son, but he also resents his son for being such a burden and not being able to communicate with him and not ever going to be able to live a normal life. And that kind of creates this internal cognitive dissonance with him, this conflict within that ends up resulting in his suicide, which is a really, really dark and troubling and I think very realistic thing to portray. Usually, people either portray caregivers of the mentally ill as just completely altruistic and wonderful and great, and they care about these people and they want to help them, or they're portrayed as bad guys who are abusive and they're trying to take advantage of them and stuff like that. And that, I think, showing that kind of ambivalence, that conflict of emotions, is an interesting way of treating it. And you don't see that very often. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, a really kind of dark and depressing book, but a lot of interesting themes handled in it, with the way that the indigenous population on Mars is handled is interesting. There's a lot of parallels to the way indigenous populations on Earth are handled, for example. I thought the villain is a little bit of a caricature of the classic, greedy white businessman trying to, exploit people for financial gain. It's a little bit of a tired character, villain archetype, although I guess it wasn't as tired in 1962, but, a little bit one-dimensional there. But I thought the rest of the book was very complex and dealt with a lot of really interesting ideas, and I had a lot of fun reading it. It's pretty short. It's about 220 pages in this edition, and so you can get through it pretty quickly. And I'm very interested to get through the rest of these. The volume also contains Dr. Blood Money, Now Wait for Last Year, Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, which is a hilarious title for a novel. I think I love sci-fi novels that have those kind of titles, like the Harlan Ellison things, like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, this like Flow My Tears, the Policeman Said, such a complex, interesting title. I have no idea what that's about. And then A Scanner Darkly, which was made into a movie, but I haven't seen that movie, so I don't know anything about what that's about either. So I'm looking forward to reading these, but I'm really glad I revisited Martian Time-Slip, because the first time I read it, I wrote it off. I said, this guy doesn't know how to write novels. I should stick to his short stories, and I now have a much greater appreciation for the depth of his writing and the ideas that he's trying to grapple with. I think it's really interesting. So I do recommend, and I will get back to you on the rest of them, but not next week, because I'll probably do something different next week. So that's my review for Martian Time-Slip. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell for notifications. Leave me comments down below, giving me your thoughts on Philip K. Dick as a writer, his novels, Martian Time-Slip, this Library of America edition, and all the rest of them. Should I get the first one too? I know I only have the second and third volumes. I don't have the first one. Let me know if I should get that. And I will be back again next week with another book review. We don't know what it's going to be yet, but it'll be something interesting for you. So please stick around for that and make sure you tune in. Until then, I've been your host, Logan Albright, and I thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you next time.